I flew down to California to go to Apple Park. Now, this is my first time visiting Apple Park, and as a side note, the images and videos of it just don't do justice. It was absolutely stunning, and everything was so well thought out, very similar to their products. But more importantly, the reason I flew down there was to talk to key Apple team members who worked on the security for Apple Intelligence. Katie, who is a privacy and security manager, and Sandy, who is a senior product manager for privacy. Now, we are all very familiar with Apple Intelligence and how helpful it is, but what most of us aren't as familiar with is the security and tech that goes on behind the scenes, specifically in regards to private cloud computing. It was pretty incredible having a company like Apple be so transparent about what they do or don't do with our data, to the point that they asked me to come have a conversation about it with their security engineer and product manager. Although there are many key takeaways for me here, one of the biggest things that I really took away from this conversation is that we really do have options when it comes to how companies use our data. We just have to advocate for ourselves. Okay, before we get into the conversation, here is a high-level explanation about what private cloud computing is. When you're using Apple Intelligence on your iPhone and you have a request that needs to use a larger model, like analyzing a personal email or creating something complex, your request gets sent to Apple's custom-built secure servers. But here's the crucial technical detail. These servers use special hardware that physically enforce privacy. And see, what makes this so different from what other companies do is really a threefold. One, your data is encrypted specifically for these servers. Once you get your response, your data is completely erased. Most importantly, unlike other AI companies who often use your data to train and improve their models or don't clearly say what they're doing with it, Apple's system is designed to be physically incapable of retaining or learning from your data. That's pretty incredible. All right, let's get into it.
Hi, Sandy. Hi, Katie. How are you both today?
Doing great.
I'm excited to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I know we were speaking a bit off camera, and this is my first time here at Apple Park, and it's seeing it in videos or seeing it in images is one thing, but it's so impactful in person, and I'm excited to continue exploring after our conversation.
Yeah, like just go see all the trees and the flowers. That's the best part.
Perfect. Well, I'm very excited to speak to you both today about Apple Intelligence, private cloud computing, and really all things security. Before we dive into that, though, I'd love to learn more about both of your roles. Sandy, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so I lead privacy product marketing here at Apple. And that's really about two things: about telling the story of privacy at Apple, about the products we build, the privacy protections we're building into our features, how we think about privacy as a value. And it's also about working with Katie and her team and figuring out what great new products we should build.
That's great. And Katie, what about yourself?
I lead privacy engineering here. So we work with teams all across Apple to help make sure we build all of our products and services with privacy. And then we also partner with teams to build privacy-first features.
That's amazing. Both of your jobs sound super interesting to me and very challenging in the best way. And it's interesting that you get to collaborate so closely together. You know, when Apple Intelligence first came out and when I first started playing around with it, one of the reactions I think that many people first have is, this is incredible, all the features that it can help me with in my day-to-day life. And then one thing for myself, anyways, I thought about is, okay, Apple is always at the forefront when it comes to security. What are they doing for security when it comes to Apple Intelligence? And that's when I started reading more so about private cloud computing. And that was, for me, the aha moment. I thought, there's no company out there that's doing anything even close to this. It was really fascinating. But yet, when I would speak to my friends or my family, they didn't really know about it. I think it's a lot of times as consumers, we take privacy or security for granted. And when I started sharing about, okay, this is what's actually going on, they were just blown away by the value that it brings and how unique it is. So I'm excited to talk to you both today more about that. And kind of on that note, I would love to hear from the both of you in your own words. What is private cloud computing in simple terms?
Yeah, so I'm so glad you're here and so glad you're interested in this topic. It's something that everyone here cares so deeply about. So private cloud compute is part of the privacy story that we've created and the privacy products that we've built for Apple Intelligence. And so when we started to build Apple Intelligence, we realized that if you're going to offer this incredible intelligence to people, you also have to offer incredible privacy. And so from the very beginning of that process, we started thinking about how is this going to work? How do we make a truly extraordinary step forward in privacy when we're building this intelligence? And so the first thing we did was we said, okay, we have a principle at this company about using on-device intelligence, which is about building the intelligence on your device so that when you're doing a task, it can process that on your device without sending the data off your device, which is great for your privacy because the data stays right with you. So we built the core of Apple Intelligence around on-device processing. And so many of the tasks you do with Apple Intelligence will be processed on your device. But of course, there are times when you need a larger model, right, to do some of the more complicated things you might want to do. And for those kind of tasks, we built private cloud compute. And what private cloud compute does is it extends the privacy and security attributes of your iPhone out to the cloud. And so it allows you to access these larger models while still retaining the privacy properties of your iPhone.
Incredible. And Katie, I'd love to get your take on this as well, because from what Sandy was mentioning as well about private cloud compute. So from my understanding, at very simple terms, so I'd love for you to expound on this, but when you send a request that is a task meant for a larger model, and it's something that private cloud compute will handle, once you get that response back, is it that information or that data is deleted? Could you expand a bit more about that process?
So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to verify the server. And so it's going to make sure that it's Apple hardware. It's going to make sure that there's SEP attestation, that the device is in the right security mode, and that it's on the transparency log. From there, then it sends up an end-to-end encrypted channel, and then it can send the data to that server. And so only that server can access and decrypt the data. After it's processed, it'll send it straight back to the iPhone, and then the data is cryptographically deleted.
It's incredible. It's really incredible. And Sandy, you mentioned that private cloud computing is part of the story. Can you expand on what you meant by part of the story by maybe sharing a bit more about the security processes at whole for it?
Yeah. So, the way we think about this is really a personal intelligence system that to provide you with really useful intelligence needs access to your personal data. Like, you might want the system to understand, a relationship, like when you say mom, who is that, right? But you don't want necessarily to share that data. You want that data to stay, private to you. And so the system that we've built across the on-device intelligence and private cloud compute, we've built it so that Apple never has access to your data. And that's really the key differentiator here. The fact that Apple never gets access, no matter how it's being processed, is really unique and really makes this an extraordinary step forward for privacy.
It really does. And on that note as well, the fact that Apple doesn't get access to that data, but then you also have third-party vendors or companies, if you will, that are able to confirm that. Because, it's one thing for a consumer to hear that from the company itself, but then to have other companies be like, no, this is what's happening.
Well, and actually, even you can go check as well. And so what we did is we've created a way that privacy and security researchers and anyone can be able to actually verify that our privacy promises are what we say they are. And as Sandy mentioned, we're expanding the, first in class security and privacy protections of your iPhone to private cloud compute. And we're also expanding our bounty program also to cover private cloud compute.
The bounty program, that was something I was going to wait to the end of the interview to chat about, but it's really incredible. There's a $1 million bounty.
Yeah, and there's a lot other, dollar amounts you can get. What we really want is we want the data to be protected. And so the more that people look at it and test it out enables us to make sure that we're making sure nobody else can access your data but you.
Well, I feel like we've touched on this through through learning about how PCC works. But if we could expand a bit more on how what you're doing here at Apple is so different for maybe someone who's watching and isn't technical and is still learning all this. How is it so different from what other companies who are making a lot of different AI announcements or coming out with AI services? How is what you're doing at Apple so different from that?
Yeah, so the really unique thing that we're doing with Apple Intelligence is we're building the system where no matter what, Apple doesn't have access to your data. That, there's a bunch of other unique elements, but if you're going to take one thing away, that should be it. And the other things that I would sort of add on to that is, the way that we have developed private cloud compute, it's different from the way sort of traditional servers operate. With a sort of a traditional server AI setup, you don't really know what's going on with your data. You don't know if it's being deleted. You don't know if things are changing. There's not any sort of transparency into that. And so that's what's I think so great about the bounty is one representation of it, but the sort of the transparency we're providing to security researchers is they can actually validate that what we're saying is true and stays true over time. And again, it goes back to like we're taking the sort of the approach of the iPhone and we're bringing it to the cloud. Like the $1 million security bounty, that is the same highest level security bounty we offer for people trying to find flaws in the iPhone software.
Yeah, we really see it as just an extension of all of the industry leading security and privacy that we've been doing for, lots and lots of years here.
Exactly. Continuing to be at the forefront for that. I want to dive into a specific example for someone who is on their iPhone using Apple Intelligence. Let's say in this case, they're using it to help them write a sensitive email. Now, maybe in this example, that if they're using Apple Intelligence, maybe it wouldn't even be something that private cloud computing is needed for. But could you walk me through a bit of that as far as how are they certain, or what is the process if they're using Apple Intelligence for this sensitive email?
So the first thing that Apple Intelligence is going to do is evaluate the task to see whether that's something that's appropriate to be done on device or whether it wants to take advantage of one of the larger server models. So if it, in this case, we're going to take advantage of private cloud compute, then as I talked about before, the data is end-to-end encrypted, sent to private cloud compute, and then it will come back down to your device. And, the other thing that can really make some of these models work great is other data. And so whether it's the information, being able to select all of the part of your email to make sure that it's written well, and only just the information that's needed for that request is what's sent to private cloud compute. And then lastly, as soon as the data comes down, it's deleted. And also that means that only you get to see that sensitive email. Apple never sees it. And that data for that sensitive email was only used to make that email great, nothing else.
That's super interesting. And more so, my own curiosity just on a technical standpoint is, for what would be an example of a task, if you can share one, that would require a larger model versus, I'm assuming something, of course, like searching different images or different things like that can happen on device. What would be?
I think an email, like you said, is a great example.
Okay.
Of where we can take advantage of the larger models, especially if it's a long email.
Yes.
Something like that. And I think that's really where you'll see that we extend this model of security and to really make sure that your email is protected. And so, I think this is where when we were building it, we took a version of iOS and we scoped it down. And really only kept the things in iOS that we really needed for this purpose of AI compute. And so we removed things that wouldn't be needed, and even never included things that are commonly in server installations. And so I'm sure you're familiar, like many server installations have an ability to remote in if there's an issue, if there's an outage, and that's something that we just did not build an ability to do so.
That's incredible. All the intricacy and thought that has to go into it. It's just like a puzzle almost.
Well, I think of it more like a cake. there's layers because, we could sit here and talk for hours about all the different protections that we put in. Like we've talked about attestation. We've talked about not even building in features that can have privacy risks. We also take things like secure boot from iOS and bring it to that platform. So it really is like, I think of it as a cake.
I feel like it's good that we have a limited time, or else I would ask you so many questions about your like where do you even start? How do you even do that layer by layer? So it's incredible though, and I like that analogy of a cake.
Well, and I think it starts with thinking about what's different about the model, because as Sandy talked about, when your data is on your iPhone, it's kind of with you. And so what are the things that change when we send it to a server, and making sure that we look at that threat model and make sure we build that cake up of the mitigations.
What is one of the biggest challenges in balancing user privacy and then balancing that with AI in PCC?
I think one of the things we think about with that is performance. And, with Apple Intelligence, there are some tasks that are better run on device much quicker. And there's some tasks that require a server model to be quick. And so it's really a balance to build the best user experience. But with Apple Intelligence, whichever model that we decide to use, it comes with the great privacy protections. So you don't have to worry.
Are there any other privacy assurances that we haven't maybe spoken about yet that you find really important?
I think one of the other key things here is about training. So how the models are trained. And one of the other really unique things about Apple Intelligence is that we don't train our foundation models on any private user data. And you can see how that's, necessary, because with private cloud compute, can't access the data. So we don't have it to train on. And so, this sort of builds on the approach we've taken for many years in this space, which is that we have found other ways to build really powerful models that don't involve training on people's personal data.
That's so huge. And I think that's something that I'm really glad you touched on, because it's something that I'll say a challenge that we're kind of facing right now is as users, when we are using different tools outside of Apple, I'm always weary of, okay, I don't want to use this tool or use something or use this model, because I know that this sensitive email I'm writing will then be used for further training. So I'm glad you called that out, because as we were speaking about earlier, especially with the email example, the sensitive email example as well, it's not being trained to further the model, it's huge.
Well, and I think that's obviously important. Like, Apple takes secrecy really serious, but also for you, when you get to work with a bunch of different folks, like having different people's data that you're in charge of handling, I can imagine you have to think about it too.
Exactly. And it's something that I have to think about, and then as well, something that everyone has to think about when they're working at different corporations or companies. You have to be so mindful of that, especially when we think about more every finance, healthcare, et cetera. It's really interesting. We spoke a lot about private cloud computing, of course, but I'm really curious to know, because, you both have been in security for a very long time and have worked on some incredible features and initiatives. Aside from private cloud computing, what are your other favorite, if you will, I'm sure it's like picking a child, favorite security features?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So if you've used the App Store in the last few years, you've downloaded an app, you probably saw, as you were looking at the app product page, there's this section called privacy, and it's got this like almost nutrition label kind of section. We call those privacy nutrition labels. And we put that out, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now. And I just think it's so cool, like to be able to see an app's privacy practices condensed into a very simple, easy to glance at and read sort of summary. I just think it's so cool.
It's really cool. And it's nice too for all users then, whether they're super technical or not. It's like you mentioned, the nutrition label. It's just easy to understand and digest.
Exactly.
Katie, what about yourself?
I think mine is maybe I'll cheat and give you 1.5. My favorite is technology, which is our technology that enables us to sync data between your devices end-to-end encrypted. I think that it's been such a game changer to power so many features, from syncing your health data across your devices to HomeKit secure video and so many other things to just help your devices work magically together, but in a way where your data is yours and you only have it. And then I'll give a little shout out to protected apps, which enables you to basically hide or protect an app, so then your notifications don't get shown unless you kind of go in there and check it out.
That's huge. That's one of my favorite ones, recent ones as well, I would say. And then I know this is kind of cheating, but for me, still top of mind is private cloud compute. And that's probably because we had this conversation. But aside from that, I think it's also what I'm so excited about right now, because as we spoke about earlier, it's so unique, and even as a consumer to many different technologies and products, it's something that is so refreshing that I can just comfortably use and not have to worry about where is my data going or where is it being trained, because that's something right now that's constantly on my mind, and I think everyone's minds.
And I think this is such a great example of us. What we do best is these big swings that pull together deep technical expertise in security, how to make sure we can run a bunch of servers, we have great uptime. So teams across Apple all really came together to make this happen. And so it's that ambition, the technical strength that I think shows us at our best.
Yeah, we're super excited about this one, for sure.
I am too. I think everyone who knows about it or is learning about it even through this conversation, you can't not be. Just the problems that or challenges that it's solving is amazing. How does the integration with OpenAI factor into private cloud computing?
I'm so glad you asked about that. So you have the capability now to ask a question to ChatGPT, and this is different from Apple Intelligence. All of the Apple Intelligence work that we've described, the features, private cloud compute, that's all Apple's work. What we've added with this integration is the ability to ask a question to ChatGPT. And when you do that, there's a bunch of privacy protections that are in play that are good to understand. So the first thing is you have to enable the integration. So you have to choose to turn it on. Then once you've done that, you can either directly ask ChatGPT, or if Siri, for example, thinks that it might have a good answer for you, it can suggest that perhaps you might want to ask ChatGPT. And if it's suggesting that, you'll be given a very clear choice. Do you want to share whatever it is with ChatGPT? And by default, you're not logged in to ChatGPT when you're asking it that. And so they're not allowed to save your queries. They're not allowed to train their models on your queries. And above and beyond that, we also obscure your IP address, so which would prevent them, not that they would do this, but this would prevent them from stringing together multiple queries over time as well. So there's a whole, like Katie said earlier, there's a cake with different layers of privacy protections there. And of course, if you want to connect your accounts because you want to get some of the great features that they offer, you can do that. And in that case, then ChatGPT's privacy policies apply.
That's great. So there's really two options. Standard is I'm not logged into my ChatGPT account, and if I'm using it, then it's the similar process where nothing is used with my data. But say if I want to have a conversation with ChatGPT that maybe has been ongoing for a while, or it had a lot of context about, and I'm comfortable with following their privacy policies, I can log in and do it that way. So there's really two specific routes to take.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Katie, Sandy, thank you so much for both of your time. I'm leaving this conversation feeling like I learned so much more about PCC, and I thought I came into it knowing quite a bit. So I really appreciate the way you break things down and make it more accessible for anyone who's watching. So thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.